Good morning.
What do you mean?
What?
Do you mean to wish me a good morning, or do you mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not? Perhaps you mean that you feel good on this particular morning. Or are you simply stating that this is a morning to be good on?
All of them at once, I suppose. Can I help you?
Well, that remains to be seen. I'm looking for someone to...
Go on an adventure?
What? No,
I'm ready.
No, just listen.
Is it this way? Let's go! Adventure! Where's he going?
No idea. Go and get him.
Yeah.
We've got this to unbox.
Right, be right back.
Listen. No! Stop that! Stop! Cut! Good morning, guys, and welcome to The Weekender. Yes, we have a little bit of a Lord of the Rings thing for you later today. Yeah. We will come to that.
Why is Ben so shivery and happy? He's across England. He doesn't have it yet.
I know what you guys are about to experience, and so that's fantastic.
Okay, this morning I'm Warren from the Beasts of War on Tabletop team, and I'm joined by Ben on the screen, Justin in the chair, and Sam in the other chair. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go on a journey through some tabletop gaming, a little bit of a World War II vibe this morning, because we've got we're going to be sitting down with Jim, our historical editor, to have a little bit of a look at the kind of stuff related to the boot camp that's coming up. So that's all set in World War II in the desert.
Yes.
So some really interesting stuff there. So if you want to pick up a few bits of historical nuggets, definitely one to tune into a little bit later on.
Also, earlier this week, we had a vlog out starting to detail what we're doing for the boot camp as well, showing off some of the stuff we're doing for some of the boards. So come across and check that out. Yeah,
if you're a backstager, do please, firstly, if you're a backstager,
thank you.
Our warmest thank you for supporting the Beast of War / OnTableTop project. You keep the site alive, you keep the content flowing. We literally can't do this without the support of backstagers. So if you're ever considering it, come across, join Backstage. This week we're actually creating trench tables. So 12 feet by 4 of 2 trench tables. We're doing it very different from what you would have seen elsewhere. We're actually making them out of upholstery foam. This is a technique that Lloyd has established. So if you come across, you'll see Lloyd's sponge rocks. We've been using foam, upholstery foam, as a means of creating some really, really hard-wearing, light, very kind of portable terrain. So we're putting it to the ultimate test and creating entire trench tables, where the trench is actually dug down into the foam, so the foam covers the entire tables and we're digging down in. Really interesting stuff. We're going to be vlogging about that over the course of the next 3-4 weeks.
All throughout the build up to the boot camp.
So lots of terrain making stuff coming up. So if you're into your terrain, come over and join Backstage. You support us, you support the rest of the community, and we're going to have a lot of fun with you guys making some terrain. This week, on the topic of terrain, this week coming in at the end of this month, we are running a terrain challenge. It's called the End Is Nigh Terrain Challenge. Ourselves and our buddies at Foreground are running this. So we have 4 prizes to win. You are basically challenged to create terrain that represents the end times, that kind of dystopian end of the world kind of thing. But you could do it in any kind of genre that you wanted. So it could be apocalyptic fantasy, post-apocalyptic sci-fi. It could be anything you want. We have had a lot of entries. They're all in there in a post that you can go and have a browse through. But we're just ringing the ding in the bell to let you know that that competition is coming to an end. The end date is the 31st, so do try to get your projects all finished by then. And the 4 categories are...
We have the best execution, the Youngbloods one.
Yep.
We also have. Are they written down here?
Yes, they are written down
Okay,
there.
so best video, best skill, best tutoring, best junior.
Okay, so let me explain these. So you have best idea. So that is about a terrain project that it doesn't matter how well you execute it, because we're not all experts at it. It's about the core idea. It's about an idea that makes us all stop and go, oh, hang on.
That's a cool one.
That's a cool idea. A previous winner made sci-fi terrain out of water pistols. And I mean,
oh, that's a cool idea.
It was seriously well done. It didn't matter about the execution. The idea itself was really cool.
Yeah.
We then have best skill. So that's for you guys who are really trying to push your skill levels on the terrain making. So that doesn't matter so much about the idea. It's about the execution. So how you execute it.
So we want it to look jaw-droppingly good.
Then we have best tutoring. So in that instance, it doesn't matter so much about the idea or the skill. It's about how well you bring other people along for the journey in teaching other people how you did what you did. So we have a prize for best tutoring. And then we have the Youngbloods. And that's for anyone under the age of 16, I believe, yeah?
Yeah.
You can enter, and we will pick our favourite Youngblood entry. And all of those guys are going to get 50 quid vouchers for foreground.
Yeah, there's been some very cool entries so far, just from the little I've been seeing skimming through.
If you want to enter at the last minute, good luck.
Yeah. The end is nearly nigh for the end.
The end is nearly nigh.
Go and raid Wilco's and find loads of stuff and stick it together on a board somewhere.
Yeah.
It's you enter by creating a project in the OnTableTop project system over at Beast 4 on Tabletop, and you tag it as a terrain challenge, and then there's a forum topic. We'll put this into the show notes so as you know what to do if you do decide you want to do a bit of a late entry to the thing.
I've got one, because does it have to be tabletop terrain? Because I have a friend who runs a post-apocalypse LARP in England.
It's called the Terrain Challenge. So we'll maybe open up the next one, because when this challenge is over, we'll take a little bit of a break, and then we'll open up the next one.
Although I'll tell you what I would do if I wanted to do something really quick. I would grab a lot of plastic toy cars, chuck them in a blender, and start gluing them down onto a board and do a junkyard board.
And ruin a blender, a perfect blender in the process.
Will it blend?
Will it blend? Yeah. Well, yeah, you might want to try that.
That would be pretty cool, actually.
A little later today, Sam and Justin, you guys are not in this show, but in a separate show that's coming out at 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
11 a.m. They're going to have a look at the new Middle-earth strategy battle game. This is the Battle for Pelennor Fields.
Can I bring the box out?
Can we show the box?
I think we're embargoed. Can we show this?
Oh, show the box. We can show the box.
We can't show inside the box yet. You have to wait, but we can show the box.
So hang on. There's the box. On the back of the box, we can see a bit of a layout of all the stuff that's in it.
I think this is one of Games Workshop's battle boards, isn't it?
Yes.
I think so. That isn't in it, I should point out.
So the battle board's not in it. I don't think the terrain is in it.
No, the terrain's not in it.
But we do have the two armies. What are the two armies that we have, Sam?
We have the forces of good and the forces of evil. Easy enough.
Fantastic, yep.
On the forces of good, you've got the warriors of Rohan. So you've got 12 warriors, 12 riders, 20 warriors of the dead. Who are awesome. And King Theoden of Rohan. There
he is.
Which is his... that's the new model exclusive to this set.
Yeah.
Previously, the only version of Theoden was from Helm's Deep. This is him at the Battle of Pelennor Fields.
And then on the other side?
On the other side, we've got the forces of Mordor. And they're led by the Witch King of Angmar on his fell beast.
Yeah, that looks awesome. I can't wait to see that.
Then there are the 36 Morannon orcs, who are like the elite of Mordor's orcs.
Yeah.
And one Mordor troll.
And then there's a hardback rulebook in this.
There is a hardback rulebook.
That is fantastic.
And a softback getting started book.
And a softback getting started.
Well, two rulers and all the dice you need to play.
And here you can see. So later today, we have an unboxing where the guys will go through this in some detail, and you can see some of the bits built as well.
I talked about a couple of the new rules that are coming in. The rules haven't been changed that much. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I want to save that for the unboxing.
Yeah.
But I will just take this moment to correct one thing I think I got wrong.
Oh, no retcon.
I said there is a move called Heroic Stab. I don't think there is. I think there is actually just a move called Stab.
I think I like Heroic Stab.
all my hobbits now have Heroic Stab.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I got mixed up.
What is the pose for a Heroic Stab? Is it...
Hey, well, give me a couple of sneaks. What are one or two of the rules?
I'll tell you some of the... one of the big ones is the introduction of heroic tears.
Yes.
Which are the
That's what happens after a heroic stab, isn't it? Yeah. You're not talking about tears as in gurning.
No,
okay,
tears
right.
is in the levels.
Oh, right, okay.
And they come into play with new ways of building your army.
Yeah.
So heroes of legend can take more warriors in their war bands than minor heroes, who would be like the captain.
Yes.
So King Theoden would be a hero of legend, whereas a captain of Rohan would be a minor hero.
Yes.
And then you've got individual heroes who are the only ones who can join other warbands.
Right.
And that changes how you build your armies for match play.
Uh-huh.
The one I particularly like is they've changed how heroic actions work now.
Yes.
So previously you had all these different heroic actions that pretty much any hero could use. But now for these ones, you have 3 ones that all heroes can do. So heroic move, heroic combat, not heroic stab. And then you've got...
there must be a fan-made heroic stab.
We need
I demand this.
Yeah. And then you've got other... maybe it is in there. I'll have to dig in again. You're making me doubt myself again on the thing I'm doubting myself on. Then there's heroic actions that are specific to your hero. So some heroes will have heroic challenge, which is a new one I particularly like.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Stay tuned for that. 11 o'clock. We will be shuffling that out, and then we're going to be trying to dig in more to the strategy battle game for Lord of the Rings or Middle Earth, because it's a franchise we all love. Okay. Yeah. Right. I think we will take a very quick break, just a second, and then we'll come back with some news.
Hi guys, I'm Mel the Train Tutor, and you're watching The Weekender on beastsofwar.com.
And welcome back. So in XLBS tomorrow, we're doing something slightly different. It's kind of like an AMA. We have a number of team members here at Beasts of War. So what we thought we would do was reach out to the community to get their questions. And man, did they come up with some stonkingly horrible questions. So
who did you say you did?
Well, I'm willing to lay odds the entire office basically got the same answer except for that one person.
Cheeky fucker. I knew that was coming. Anyhow, it means tomorrow's XLBS is something a bit different. It's an opportunity for you to get to know all of the faces that are here, both in front of camera and behind the scenes, just to get a feel for who they all are. However, what it means also is that I don't get to melt your mind tomorrow.
Oh, boo-hoo for
No, don't panic, man. Don't panic.
Okay,
because we still have a weekender. You may not be used to this, okay?
Let's preface it for everybody out there then. They might even not know what this is.
That's what he's doing. It's time to melt Justin's mind. Okay, so the Mind Melter is something that we do, that typically I do in XLBS.
Yeah.
I like to come up with stuff to broaden Justin's horizons, and it's always 100% linked to gaming. I never deviate.
It's always scientific fact.
It's always scientific fact by experts, because I still believe in experts. Okay, right. So this one, I think, would suit any RPG players out there. Okay, because let me tell you what brought it up first. There's a chap, an expert, we will call him, and his name is Al Worden.
Right.
Al Worden was an Apollo astronaut. is an Apollo astronaut. The guy is still with us. He circled the moon 75 times. He's a pilot,
right?
Okay, daring do kind of a guy,
right?
And they reckon that he is the guy who's been the farthest away from human life at any one point because of the way his particular trajectory went when his comrades, his fellow astronauts were on the surface of the moon, just with his particular orbit. It meant that he holds the record for being the furthest away from any other human life.
Now, you say that, but last time I got really into a Final Fantasy game, I was pretty far away from human life for quite a while.
Sam, you're still pretty far away from it.
Let's use science on this, because I think this could be fun. So, have they calculated where on the moon him and his buddies were?
No, his buddies. He was still in the ship.
No, this is what I'm saying, because the nearest human life is his buddies on the moon.
Correct.
So they've had to calculate where they are on the moon to the furthest point of his orbit.
Yes.
And is that broader than the entire Earth?
No.
Then that's a lie. Oh, no, sorry.
No, it wouldn't be because...
Yeah. My logic failed.
Yeah, you're assuming that there's only 2 people on the entire planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad he scienced that. Anyway, Al Worden was on a British morning TV show.
Is this
there's a photograph. I loaded it in. So this is Al Worden here. He was on Good Morning Britain.
15.
Okay. And they were talking about UK chicken suppliers film tampering with food safety records.
I'm not scared about that.
No, we're not talking about the guys choking chickens. No, we are talking about Al Worden. So Al Worden was on, and it was a very bog standard interview. It started out with him. Basically, they were saying all sorts of nice stuff to him. Then they asked him a little bit about controversy, at which point he got a little bit prickly. He says, "What are you bringing that up?" Basically, the astronauts took stamps and stuff with them to the moon, and then brought them back and then flogged them off for high levels of money.
Yeah.
And the US government was not happy about that and made examples of those fellas on that particular flight, even though all the other flights had done it up until that point.
Just because they got caught.
So it's so we were a bit prickly about that. But the interview then went fine again. They were talking about it. Then they came to a question, right? Which had an answer that you will never expect.
Right.
Okay?
Go ahead.
They said to him,
Did they find the clangers?
No. Well, a bit like that. They said to him, do you believe in aliens? Do you think that there's aliens out there?
All right.
Now, what you would have expected from your standard Apollo rhetoric, okay, would be, well, the universe is a vast place. Yeah, we fully expect that they'll be out there somewhere. What he said, and I shit you not, was, we are the aliens. We are already here.
And do you think there's extraterrestrials out there, Al, as well? What? Do you think there's aliens?
You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Do you believe in aliens? And I say, yeah. Have you ever seen one? I say, yeah, I have. Well, how have you seen them? Well, I said, I look in the mirror every morning. Because that's what we are. We are the aliens, but we just
think we're the thing.
We just think they're somebody else, but we're the ones who came from somewhere else. Because somebody else had to survive, and they got in a little spacecraft, and they came here, and they landed, and they started civilization here. That's what I believe. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they had to say.
That's a whole different discussion.
He says, if the Sumerians got it right. The Sumerians wrote about it thousands of years ago. Some aliens were having trouble on their planet, and they left, and they came here, and they created us. We are the aliens. Now, this is so cool, okay? Because this guy's an expert.
Yeah,
now, we can turn around and say, well, anybody can be a bit loopy, okay? You can say that. But at the same time, this guy's an expert pilot. And you say, well, pilots can be loopy. That's fine. I don't travel on planes. But you guys do. So
does that make me an expert?
So you're maybe putting your trust in him. And so I believe this guy, is telling the truth from what he believes. Yeah. And he totally confirmed. He said, this is what I believe. Go and look it up. Yeah. So this brings into account some really interesting things, okay?
Right.
So this is about ancient Sumeria, okay? And it brings in things about like the Nibiru, which was an interesting planet. So Nibiru is a planet that is a planet on a very, very strange orbit around our sun that takes, is it 3,500 years or 35,000 years? It's something, it's one or the other. I know there's a big difference between the two, but it's only a zero between friends. So the idea is that they needed gold, okay? And they came to Earth and they harvested gold and created people to get the gold, because what they do is they particleize the gold and put it into their atmosphere. Right. I don't know why they want to do that. It sounds ridiculous to me.
Perhaps something on their evolution needs it.
Or they just like the sparkles.
Maybe they just like the sparkles. But whatever it is, it's kind of cool. Yeah. Okay? Now, they're called, I believe, the Anunnaki, is the name of this particular race. But
so the Anunnaki.
But here's the Anunnaki. But here's what I'm wondering. Has anybody yet created a role-playing game, okay, where you can play as a Sumerian, okay, and it's so much where you are interacting in the court of the Sargon of Akkad or something like that, and the dealings with this alien race is going on, and you're trying to get to the bottom of it.
Role-playing that time of the ancient aliens.
Yeah.
I doubt if you'd be trying to get to the bottom of it, more lifting a sword and going, kill it, kill it.
No, I don't want that kind of RPG, because remember,
a political one.
Yeah, I would like something that is more intellectually focused than necessarily being a hack and slash. A hack and slash would be fun, Justin, but there's no shortage of hack and slash.
Yeah, but I'm looking at ancient Sumeria going, would that actually fit having a political intrigue?
Oh, yes.
Really? Okay.
I can tell you, and I know I bring it up every time RPGs are mentioned, but the World of Darkness systems entirely lend themselves to political play. So if you just took that system and moved it back to that...
But for the theme you're going for, would ancient Sumeria have had that depth of a political society?
Absolutely.
Certainly, yes.
Okay, that was the question.
Absolutely. There is a chance, right? There is a remote chance that in some ways that they were at least as sophisticated as us in many ways in terms of their politics. Oh God, politics in 27. They were more sophisticated than us in terms of their politics. They built huge, I think they're called ziggurats. Ziggurats, yeah, which are like massive, kind of like pyramid-y, temple-y kind of things. You know, they had glass that changed color, that they were able to make kind of glass that was red but in certain conditions then turned green. They had all sorts of
invented traffic lights.
To bring this into to give you a little bit more of a play on this, I'm not sure how the timelines intersect, but there's the ancient Indians have a thing, I think it's called the Vedic texts, where they talk about what is kind of described as almost like a nuclear war taking place.
I know the one you mean.
Missiles and nukes and stuff like that going on.
I assume they're not called missiles and nukes.
Well, no, they call them other things because those words weren't invented back then. But the devices effectively were, and they talk about the gods having a fight.
It talks about one of the Hindu deities going over, and
they talk about flying machines and all that kind of thing. Now, what's interesting, I'm going to throw a name of another expert in there. The expert Robert Oppenheimer. So Robert Oppenheimer, is basically the father of the atomic bomb.
Yes.
Okay, and there's a famous interviews with him where he believes basically along the lines of, I wasn't the first to use nukes on this planet.
Right.
And he was a believer in those ancient Vedic, I think they're called Vedic texts. So I don't know how the timelines link in there between those two societies, but certainly I think a political kind of mystery that would be based in ancient Sumeria would be, I think it would be a fascinating thing. Absolutely fascinating.
Well, you'd have to research the source material to Hallenbach to actually make it feel authentic.
No,
or would you go on more fantasy stuff?
No, we get somebody else to build it, man. We won't do anything. we just throw the ideas out and let them do it. If any of you are a budding RPG writer, though, I'm quite happy to fire up a game designer challenge here.
Oh, it's been a while since we've done one of these.
Yeah. If anybody does have an interest in creating something around this lore, I'm not expecting many of you to get back, but if anybody does, and you think to yourself, actually, I'd really like to create something about that, around that lore, I will fire up a game designer challenge, and we will reach out to some of the top RPG game developers out there and put you in touch and get you mentoring and actually run you through a game designer challenge to see what it would take to put together a basic single adventure, okay, in Sumeria at that time, dealing with the fact that there's alien intervention and that you are describing it. Because I believe that the Sumerians actually even documented when, that they had claimed it was 430,000 years prior, which is just about the time that humanity started to emerge in the fossil record.
Maybe.
You see, Justin, this is all about the size of your brain. Believe it or not, scientists are puzzled by the size of your brain. You shouldn't be able to do what you are capable of doing. I'm using you figuratively. I mean, it's all. But,
as a species, yes.
Well, yes, you're a species all of your own. Yeah.
I've watched documentaries where they've been.
Have you really? Sorry, go on ahead, yeah.
No, I've seen ones where they're actually puzzled over humanity's ability to walk upright. Because it's not a natural pose.
Well, it's interesting that too. It's not natural at all. But we do it very well.
Yes.
We do it very well.
They were actually running simulations on taking the different evolutionary stages of mankind and just trying to figure out exactly at what point we were fit to walk properly upright.
Yeah.
It was actually really intriguing.
That's about 10 a.m. for me.
It's aliens, man. It's aliens. Last week on XLBS, I did an excellent, I didn't expect it to go in, it went in, but I did an excellent presentation on ancient Egypt.
Yeah, we kind of got caught on that one.
Completely historically correct.
Going to be going into the Oxford system.
But you know, I thought I know you were missing aliens, and I thought I would give it to you.
I actually do believe there are aliens out there. I just think we're nowhere near evolved enough for them to have any interest in us.
Do you know what? You could be right. We could be a zoo. I think that is probably, it's the most logical explanation other than them not being there at all. Because if they were there, the chances of them being there a long time before us are pretty high, in which case you would have expected the machineries, the robots, the self-replicating robots and stuff to be all over the galaxy. So I think it's actually, if they are there, I think it's more likely that we are actually just contained.
So we're like a nature reserve?
Yes. Basically, asshole zoo. No, but think about it, right? Yeah. The world is utterly full of arseholes. Would you trust... I wouldn't trust us with a box of matches on a galactic scale, really.
Yeah, well, galactic scale matches, I'm sure that could burn a world.
But really, would you?
Yeah.
Like,
honestly,
seriously, man.
Honestly, no.
It's like that line of Pratchett. The last word said by anyone before the end of the world will probably be, "I wonder what happens when I press this button."
That's exactly right. You know, honestly, I'm not an alien. And I can think of about 16 bars in this town that I would like to go and just lock the doors. So, you know, I totally get where they're coming from here. Absolutely. Anyway, Sumeria. There you go.
Okay, that was interesting.
Was it interesting?
That was interesting.
And the clip is there. They've seen the clip. This astronaut absolutely believes this.
Okay.
So,
well, we'll have a look.
Ben, tell me about some news.
Cool. So,
back to
from
the
one fantastical idea to another. We're going to be looking at some stuff from Otherworld Miniatures now, and this is a range of dragons that came out quite recently, not like very, very recently, but in the last couple of weeks or so.
Okay!
Yeah, that is a bit of a Shrek.
My mouth's open and everything! I love it! That's Shrek, that's Donkey's dragon!
I love that dragon, but the facial expression, to me, that's just seeing that the adventurer just did a magic trick in front of it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I love it! Do it again! Do it again!
Sorry, man.
How'd you make my horde go?
Yeah, I just wanted to show these off because I thought these were really fantastic dragons for those that are getting stuck into sort of a little bit of sort of the old Hammer style Dungeons and Dragons.
These are seriously old Hammer, man.
That was not bad.
They've got a very cool old school feel to them, which I really enjoy. You've got the red one there, which is actually based off the cover of one of their skirmish rule books that they create. But then you've also got the blue dragon, the green dragon, the black dragon, and the white dragon as well, included in this collection. My favourite is probably the one at the end, which is the white dragon, because I just think the proportions and everything match up very nicely indeed. But it's just really nice to have another option for those that want to look for some more of their chromatic dragons that they're going to be using in their Dungeons and Dragons campaigns and stuff like that. But yeah, some really cool characterable dragons. Obviously, there's lots of other interesting ones out there as well. There's like the likes of Reaper Bones. They do some absolutely stunning dragons, and there are loads of them coming out from other companies too. But yeah, just wanted to highlight these as a little bit something different. A little bit of a callback to the past and those old massive pewter metal models that you used to get to play with your role-playing game.
Are these metal?
They are all metal, yes.
Oh my god!
That make you happy?
Oh, that does make me happy. I wasn't happy, but the moment he says that they're metal, absolutely. Metal dragons, metal! Love that. Love that. Missing the gold dragon, though.
Yeah. Although this is something I've talked about a few times, is the actual weight of a miniature can actually enhance your experience of actually playing with it.
Oh, yeah.
If it makes you feel any better, it's not just any metal, it's pewter. So, old school metal.
Proper old school.
Yeah, I absolutely love those dragons. Dragons are one of my great loves in fantasy. My first monster book, as it were, was a pop-up book of dragons. I still have it somewhere because I don't throw away anything.
Does it still pop up?
It does still pop up.
I love dragons too, man. Yeah. As a kid, my favorite song for a long time was "A Dragon, a Dragon. I swear I saw a dragon." Pete's Dragon.
I swear I saw a dragon.
Yeah. Vaguely
I'm utterly wasted on these cretins. Right, next up we have some terrain, and not just any terrain. Get a load of this.
Yes.
Oh my god. Hagglethorn.
Okay, yeah, so this is some terrain from Tabletop Troubadour, which is a company run by Johnny Fraser Allen, who works at Weta Workshop as well, down in New Zealand. And you may remember him from doing a couple of videos, maybe last year, I think it was, where he was designing some terrain and some of the models for the Labyrinth board game. Now, Johnny Fraser Allen is a fantastic fan of role-playing games and adventure games and skirmish games, and so he wanted to create his own terrain to use on the tabletop. And that's what you see here with Hagglethorn Hollow. This is a range of terrain that is entirely modular, that you could use for all your role-playing games and stuff like that. And as well as it being presented here, as you can see in that video where he was talking to Adam Savage about this, he's actually going to be taking this to Kickstarter to show off some of his terrain, specifically the buildings that you see towards the bottom half of this news piece. For you guys to use at home. They're all going to be modular. They can all be done in different tiers and different ways. They can be used across a variety of different styles and aesthetics as well. And he shows all of this off in the video, looking at each of them individually and showing off how you can put them together. But as well as all the buildings that he's done for this, he's also created some absolutely fantastic trees that I think you need to have a really good look at. All of these trees are not like normal ones. They're actual creatures. That because his forest itself moves around on the tabletop and during the night, during the world, and the forest actually looks after itself. So it's a little bit like Ents, but all of these trees have been designed to look like animals and dinosaurs and all kinds of different things like that. And they are truly some of the most beautiful trees I've ever seen.
Johnny is a hell of a talented guy.
My favourite of those has to be the Tree Rex.
Tree Rex.
Yeah, they're amazing. I watched the video with Adam Savage yesterday, and that stuff is incredible. It's one of the most detailed, characterful boards I've ever seen. And you mentioned he worked on the Labyrinth board game. You do get that Jim Henson feel from the stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm in love with this.
Yeah.
I want to see this.
One of the other really cool things about this as well is that they're going to be coming to Kickstarter with all of this. I think it's sometime in September, and there's word that they're going to be offering up not just some sort of physical products of this, but also the STL files for those who want to try and download it later on as well. So you've got really nice opportunities to get a hold of this and try around and play around with it to your heart's content, basically, which is very, very cool.
Very cool.
Very exciting.
Fantastic. Next up, we have a 3D printing project for you guys to have a look at. This is for things that could be used for like Necron Tomb Worlds.
So yeah, so this is the guys at 3D Alien Worlds who do some absolutely fantastic stuff on their website. All of their terrain is downloadable STL files, as we were talking about before when we were looking at stuff from Hagglethorn Hollow and that kind of thing as well. But this kind of terrain can be downloaded and used as many times as you want to create some absolutely fantastic landscapes. In this case, it's for creating a Necron Tier 2 tomb worlds, as you can see here. So you've got the really nice wall sections, everything like that, and the massive gatehouse as well. This is the kind of stuff that you basically want to own if you have a Necron army and you don't want to buy more miniatures. You buy stuff like this, use this as your hobby, creating walls and all those kind of different things, and make your board very much your own. So you can set out campaigns set on Necron tomb worlds and all kind of things like that. I was actually thinking about how cool it would be to do some kind of Necron tier labyrinth. So you use those massive walls and use them as something that maybe your Death Watch kill team has to work their way through, or something like that, trying to get to the core of the tomb world and destroy it or something. So
that would be a great idea. I would love to see the interior of a Necron tomb world done with these. One I would particularly like, and this was in a kind of Kane novel that you lent me.
Yep.
Was when they go underneath the planet's surface and they find themselves in the tomb world with all the rows of the dormant Necrons. It was very much Tomb of the Cybermen from
very cool.
Doctor Who. I would love to see that mixed in with these walls.
So what, you would do something like the Terracotta Army with Necrons?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool looking.
That is pretty cool, isn't it?
There was even actually back in time, there was a White Dwarf battle report that was done years and years ago now, where it was the first time the Death Watch showed up again after a really long hiatus. The Imperial Guard had to hold their own against the Necron army on the surface, while the Death Watch kill team went inside the tomb complex to try and destroy it from the inside. And it was an absolutely fantastic battle report. It's in one of the really, really old versions of the magazine. But if you can find it, dig that one out, because it'll have some very cool inspiration for you, I think. So.
Fantastic. Okay, our final bit of news for this week is Lookout Games' Isle of Skye Druids expansion.
Cool, yeah. So I wanted to raise this one mainly because I really like Isle of Skye. So Isle of Skye is a tile-laying game, a little bit akin to something like Carcassonne, for example. But this game has a little bit more depth to it. Whereas Carcassonne is very much an entrance-level game, Isle of Skye is something a little bit more different. The mechanics in it sort of lend itself to a little bit more competitive play. It's got like almost like a bidding pricing system in it, where you sell off parcels of land to each of the different players around the table. And there's a really interesting scoring mechanic in it, where certain things will only score on certain rounds. So, for example, on round 1, sheep might score very well, but then on round 2, 3, and 4 they don't. So you've got to try and manipulate your tactics as you go through the game. And this is all done in a very modular system, so the scoring changes every single time you sit down to play Isle of Skye. This expansion adds even more stuff into it. So this is the second expansion for Isle of Skye, called Druids, and this adds in not only another aspect of scoring, but also some new special tiles into the game as well. So these special tiles allow you to have both blessings and curses. So you've got blessings that will help you and score you more points in different ways, and you've got curses which can affect your enemies as well. So Isle of Skye has already got a really nice level of player interaction in it already, with that kind of bidding and sort of pricing mechanic at the start of a turn. But now it's also got this blessing and cursing thing added into it as well, which is really, really cool. And I definitely would say that if you like things like Carcassonne, go and check out Isle of Skye. It's a really nice sort of like next step for someone who likes tile laying.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Cool. Right. Time for a little bit of World War II. So we've had our mind melting, we've had our sci-fi, fantasy. Right. Yourself and John are going to sit down with Jim and talk a little bit about Desert War.
Yes.
Hi everybody, we have been joined by Jim Oriskany from the site to talk about World War II again. I'm of course joined by John as well, and if you don't know me, I am Justin. Right, gentlemen, welcome to the show. What are we talking about? What sort of era of the war are we looking at? If you couldn't tell by James's screen here.
So we have the boot camp scheduled for the end of September. It is on the way. It is bolt action. It is 28mm Western Desert Theater of World War II. Now, we're certainly no strangers to the Desert Theater of World War II here at Beasts of War. We've done at least one past boot camp on it, and at least 3 article series that I can think of off the top of my head. Still, with bolt action, though, we are approaching this from a new angle. So I was talking with Warren before, and what we're trying to do is we wanted to get people prepared for the boot camp. We wanted to help players approach who may be a little bit new to historical wargaming. We wanted to help players approach the subject with a little bit more confidence, kind of get them geared up, get them filled in on the context and background, some what the armies looked like, what the armies may have been painted like, how they would have been built, how they would have operated, some of the weapons at play here. Get a lot of this done before the boot camp, so that people arrive at the boot camp already in the right, mindset. They got all the technical and historical and tactical information that they may want or may not want, or whatever. They can take it or leave it as they want.
Yeah.
But basically, people are. There's been some threads in the comments lately, and they're really great threads about the accessibility of historical wargaming. So we're doing our best to make this as accessible as possible. And yeah, so we're just basically rerunning some article series to get that ready for people.
Cool, cool. Now, are any of the parts already up for everybody, or is this something in the future?
Yeah, part 1 is already up. It's getting a great response on the website. We've got we're coming up on like 90 or 100 comments or something like that. So we're doing pretty well on that. This is actually an older series that we ran back in 2015. We ran a 5-part article series on the Great War. We're rerunning this now with some updated and better graphics. We're putting more focus on bolt action, putting more focus on the boot camp specifically, and yeah, we're pretty much taking some older content and we're repurposing, we're cleaning it up, we're giving it that Beasts of War 2.0 finish, and we're putting it out there for a second run.
Awesome, awesome stuff. Now, Desert Warfare. So I'm guessing this is quite early in the war. We're not going to see any of the big cats or anything at the boot camp.
Oh, the big cats would have been around towards the end of the desert campaign, particularly when the British got to around Tunisia and stuff like that. But this period of the war is what historians would call mid-war. So mid-war sort of encompasses the Western Desert campaign. It would sort of stretch into the Sicily and the beginning of the Italy campaign. But on other fronts, it would also encompass the beginning of the Eastern Front. So Barbarossa and that sort of stuff.
Gotcha.
You encompass all of that as a sort of a mid-war. So it's early 42 to mid to late 43, I would say, Jim, would be around mid-war.
The article series really takes the entirety of the Desert War.
Yeah.
And so part 1 is a good example. We start off with the whole Desert War, which is really a lot more expansive than most people think. So John's absolutely right. The part of the Desert War that most people are probably most familiar with is that Rommel shows up in mid-41, early 41. He really gets going in mid-41. He does very well through mid-42. El Alamein is late 42. He's on the back foot after that. The Americans come in, and more British and Free French in Operation Torch. That's November of 42. Closes in on Tunisia in early 43, and by May of 43, it's all over.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what are some of the key locations from the Desert War? Because for me, whenever I think Desert War, World War II, I'm thinking you're fighting along just the north coast of Africa. You don't ever go deep into Africa whenever you're fighting this war.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so, oh wow, some of the key locations. Well, the two biggest areas are the areas that we hear about the most often. That's going to be Libya and Egypt. There's a big seesaw campaign that goes back and forth multiple times, at least 3 or 4 times, depending on how you count, between those two countries. But it goes as far west as Morocco. When the Americans land in Operation Torch, it goes through Algeria, Tunisia, obviously. It goes as far south as Madagascar, although by then we're not really even in a desert anymore. There's bombings in Kenya. There's a major campaign in what's today Ethiopia, Eritrea, 2 places in Somalia. There's an Axis inspired or an Axis instigated uprising that gets started in Iraq. So an insurgency in Iraq. Stop me when this starts sounding familiar. We have invasions of invasions of Vichy French colonies in places as far off as West Africa and also in Syria. We see actually Vichy French and Free French forces fighting each other. So it really does spread all over the place. It's, except for maybe the Pacific, in sheer surface area, the Desert War, the Middle Eastern War, the African War, however you want to categorize it, really is probably, except for the Pacific and the Battle of the Atlantic, this is probably the biggest campaign of the war in sheer amount of area that it took up.
All right, well, let's talk about part 2 of the article series then. That's going to be the opening gambits of the campaign. So we've heard about Operation Torch, which is the Allied side of things. What were the Germans' opening salvos?
Okay, so the war gets started almost by accident. It gets started by Mussolini, who, you know, you almost can't blame him. I mean, poor Mussolini.
I mean Mussolini has become an internet meme because of his strange decisions.
Yeah, okay, so it's the summer of 1940. The Germans have just got into France and the Low Countries and Scandinavia. They're cleaning up. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've all heard the stories. They're winning absolutely everywhere. They're winning everything. Italy saw, and Mussolini specifically, watched Hitler rise through power. Mussolini started off as a much more powerful leader in the early 20s. He saw Hitler come up, and he saw the Third Reich kind of raise all through the 30s, and he's like, that's not going to come to anything. That's not going to come to anything. Finally, it does come to something, and Italy is not prepared. That doesn't matter, Mussolini thinks, because we're not getting involved in World War II. And his generals, his admirals, his ministers, his marshals all breathe a huge sigh of relief. That's very good, Il Duce, because we are at least a decade away from being ready for anything bigger than, all girls pillow fight. I mean, we're not ready for anything here. This is nuts. Yeah. So Mussolini's like, relax, we're not getting involved in anything. Oh, wait, the Germans are winning absolutely everywhere. They're cleaning up. France is in the process of collapsing. Britain is about to collapse. Look at all these colonies over here in Africa and in Asia and in the Middle East and maybe even in the Pacific. They own like a third of the planet in these days. They're like, oh man, that stuff's just going to be up for grabs in a second. We're talking about like a global garage sale. Here we go. You know what, guys? We're going in. We're attacking France and we're attacking some of these British colonies. Il Duce, we're not ready. We're not even close. We told you this. He's like, relax. There's not going to be a fight. These guys look at the French. They're in the process, basically, of already surrendering. They're already walking to that infamous rail car. Yeah. We're done. No, because of course the French, even as they're losing to the Germans up in the northern part of France, they kick the hell out of the Italian armies that outnumber them like 7-1. In the south of France, when Italy tries to invade the south of France in June of 1940, in July and August of 1940, the Italians start invading British colonies throughout East Africa and eventually Egypt and North Africa. This is in September and August and September of 1940. This is as the Battle of Britain is taking place. Britain is already engaged in massive land wars in these far-off colonies because Italy thinks that England's about to quit. Yep. They're either going to lose the Battle of Britain or sea lion's going to happen, and then, even if they don't win, Mussolini thinks, I'm okay. His exact quote is to his ministers, don't worry about it. All I need is to suffer a few thousand dead, and I can sit at the peace table as somebody who's fought. He just wants to get his toe in the door, say that he's in the war, so when the war is over, he gets to sit at the negotiating table and throw some poker chips on the table.
Yeah, and he wants to sit there and say, you see this, and this, those are mine now. Yeah.
It doesn't work out for him because Britain doesn't fall, the French fight back, the Americans come in, and before you know it, he gets dragged into Russia, of all things. Yeah. And, so part one was Italy's getting started. To get back to your question, way too late. Part two is the British. The British, I can't believe this guy isn't more famous. This guy deserves to be 10 times more famous than Montgomery. Richard O'Connor. This is the guy who won Britain her first real land victory in World War II. This is Operation Compass. This is Britain's big invasion back into Libya, which was an Italian colony in those days, in December of 1940 into the spring of 41. This goes so badly for the Italians. The 10th Army basically disintegrates. The 10th Army is 7 to 10 times the size of, it's not even the 8th Army at this point, it's the Western Desert Force. It's got like 50 Matildas and some Indian divisions, and some Australians are there as well. There's not a lot there, but this guy O'Connor absolutely takes back all the parts of Egypt that the Italians have conquered, destroys the Italian 10th Army to the point where the logistics officers give up on counting prisoners. There's actually a quote in one of the London newspapers where British officers are reporting Italian prisoners by the acre. We have 5 acres of officers and 200 acres of other ranks because they've given up just counting the tens of thousands. It's like the Gulf War in 1991. It's insane. They take half of Libya. It gets so bad that the Germans say, look, we have nothing to do with what's going on down there in Africa, but if we don't do something, the British are going to own the entire southern part of Europe. Based off of North Africa, we got to stabilize the situation. That's where Rommel comes. Part 2.
All right, and then whenever Rommel actually gets there, what are the first things he sort of actually does to start rectifying what could have
he gets started right off the bat. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, John? Or
no, go ahead.
Okay. Rommel gets started right off the bat with being an insubordinate, as he's often, very good at. He arrives in Tripoli with a couple battle groups. His so-called Deutsches Afrika Corps is nothing of the kind at the moment. He's got some leftover divisions, leftover pieces of divisions. Basically, he gets the scraps and leftovers of what isn't going to be ready in time for Barbarossa.
Right.
Hitler is getting ready for the invasion of Europe. This is the spring of 1941. He doesn't give any kind of a damn about Yugoslavia, Greece, Crete, Albania, the Africa, any of these, this Balkan and Mediterranean and North African stuff that the Italians are getting themselves mixed into. He doesn't care. He's busy getting ready for the real war, and now he has to stabilize the situation in North Africa. So he's like, all right, whatever's not going to make it and not going to be ready for in time for Barbarossa, just give to this guy Rommel. He was getting on our nerves during France. Yes, he did very well. He also proved that he doesn't know how to obey an order. We could never keep track of where he was. Just send him some stuff down there, and Rommel, don't do anything, okay? Just go down there, straighten the Italians out, stabilize them a little bit, make sure they don't lose all of Libya, and just kind of stabilize the situation out down there, okay? So, just chill out for one hot minute.
Yeah.
Rommel interprets that as, I'm going to Cairo. So he starts his big invasions, and of course he starts doing really well for a whole bunch of reasons that aren't really the British faults. That guy O'Connor that I mentioned before, that great British general, he ends up getting captured in a surprise attack, so he gets kind of taken out of the war too soon. Probably one reason he's not very well known. And that's where we wind up at in part 2, is this beginning of this seesaw back and forth. You see more of this seesaw back and forth in part 3. This is, and I'm on the wrong slide here. Hold on one second. In part 3, this is where we see Operation Crusader, Rommel's probably most famous offensive. This is the Gazala offensive of early 1942. Part 4, we get into the part that we've covered a great deal in the past. This is the Battle of El Alamein. This is where Rommel has pushed deepest into Egypt in the in the fall of 1942. Summer and fall of 42. He finally runs out of his supply lines. He finally gets stopped. He gets counterattacked. There's a new British general in charge. This is, of course, General Bernard Law Montgomery. He does much better than his predecessors for a whole stack of reasons we won't get into right now. And that's pretty much where we turn the tide in part 4. And then in part 5, we have the end game. Part 5 is where Montgomery chases Rommel back to Tunisia. Simultaneously, more British forces under General Alexander and American forces under guys like Patton and Bradley and Eisenhower land, I should say Eisenhower, Patton, and Bradley in those days, land in Morocco and Algeria, and then they start pushing to the east and meet up in Tunisia. And we have that final Tunisian pocket where the Desert War finally comes to a close.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, like, it's a very interesting sort of era of the war, because we did see quite a bit of technological advancement and repurposing of a lot of the technology that was there. The first use of the 88s as an anti-tank weapon.
Well, France,
really?
France,
they were used.
Yeah, they were. That was when they were discovered to be horrendously good at killing tanks.
Okay.
The story goes that there was a flak battery that had started to become under attack by, I think it was Matilda 2s or Matilda 1s or something.
Right.
Yeah, it's the Battle of Arras.
Yeah, that's right. And they were looking at these tanks going, our anti-tank screen isn't doing it. They're firing like hell at them, but we're watching the tracers.
Our Pak 37mm guns aren't working. I can't imagine why.
They're watching these shells bounce off, and they're like, this gun's a really big gun. Let's level that off and see what happens. And lo and behold, it turned the tanks inside out. So
I have to wonder what the reaction was whenever the first shot was fired from an 88 and hit a tank from the crew.
I'm sure the crew were quite satisfied.
Well, I went, yay!
I would be, because that tank can no longer kill me. And I can kill it.
I'm assuming
the
whenever that
documented case of this is actually in the Spanish Civil War of 36.
Yeah.
Really?
But in defense, because everyone was sending equipment to Spain in 1936 for the Civil War and like testing it out. People already knew there was a war coming in Europe sooner or later. However, that's often kind of rolled out by the grognards as, excuse me, I believe you mean to say Spain 1936. Well, okay, you use an 88 against the Soviet T-26 and you blew it up. congratulations. You know, T-26 is like a lawnmower on tracks, basically.
Yeah.
So the first time they were used against serious tanks is the Battle of Arras that John mentions.
Yeah.
And but that was Rommel. I don't know if he was actually on the field, but it's definitely his division that was there. What Rommel does in the desert is he develops this from, instead of just being an emergency, there are Matildas, they're literally overrunning our headquarters right now. What do we got that might make a hole? 88, try that. Oh, that made a hole. Okay, well, do that some more. That's the Battle of Arras. In the desert, he actually says, you know what, that really worked well for me in France. Let me start seeing what, and he develops this into a tactic, into a doctrine that he does over and over and over again. And it's amazing how long it takes the British to catch on to this. He sends out his Mark IIs and Mark IIIs, which are undergunned with these 2-centimeter autocannon and these 5-centimeter little L42 pop guns, and he's like pinging on these Crusaders and these Matildas, and they're not really doing very much. And then they run away, and you know, it's like hitting a beehive with a baseball bat. The British tanks are all upset. They're all fired up. They're like, damn those Jerrys, we're going to get them this time. And they chase after them, and then they go over this rise, and there's this screen of 88s and hold down, or in reverse slow positions like 2 miles away.
Yep.
The British tank crews don't even see them yet. They don't even see the muzzle flashes, and all of a sudden they start exploding. And they're like, did the Germans invent satellite delivered artillery before, you know, 100 years too early? What's going on here? Why are we all exploding out of nowhere?
Yeah.
It's those 88s you can barely see.
Gotcha.
And they have targets on them because he keeps baiting you into these attacks. And it happened a depressing number of times.
Yep. Mm-hmm. All right, well, Jim, you've arranged a lot more slides for us. So what's the next thing you have on your running order you want to chat about?
Oh, this is just the slide that goes into what you were talking about before, Justin, where we look at the real scope of how big this war really was. Now, we say big in terms of land area. So we're looking at, you know, again, from Morocco all the way down to Madagascar, all the way up to Syria and Iraq, if you count all the smallest little insurgency battles. Syria was a full-blown invasion. But you see, like, there's, you know, there are these battles and engagements all over the place. So, yeah, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, modern-day Ethiopia, they called it Abyssinia in those days. Eritrea, where some Italian units did really, really well. Madagascar. We're also going to be talking about some of the nations that the Germans brought in, that these different armies brought in. In the boot camp, we're going to be getting Germans and British. And when people talk about the desert, you're talking about Germans and British. The problem is that's about 20% of the forces, and that's not a hyperbole. That's not, you know, let me grab a number out there to make a point. It's about 20% of the forces are British or German. For the Germans, easily 75% of their forces at all times were Italians.
Yeah.
And some of these Italian units, there are different types. Everyone's heard about the bad ones, because the Italians are fun to laugh at in World War II. There's some divisions that did really well, and there's some paratrooper and the Ariete Armor Division. I hope I pronounced that right. Littorio Motorized Division. There's some units that did pretty well, and the Vichy French were in there. The Vichy French kicked Patton. I mean, gave Patton one hell of a bloody nose when he first came ashore in Morocco. Vichy French, unfortunately, are Axis troops, and they do pretty well in the opening stages of Torch. So the Axis is a little more complicated than a lot of people tend to remember. Meanwhile, the Commonwealth of Nations, or whatever you want to call it, the Allies, are even more so, man. I mean, holy crap. The British have, I say British, the Allies have Australians, New Zealanders, Free French, South Africans, people from modern-day Malawi. Many of their divisions were from India, and you got to remember, India back then included what is today Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan. We have Zionist Palestinians in there. We have Czechs and Poles that fought in Tobruk. We have Greeks at El Alamein, Kenyan regiments of Kenyan rifles. There's even an anti-aircraft unit from Hong Kong in here. When we say an allied war, we really mean it. I mean, what this means in bolt action, and what this means for the wargamer, is that if you're seriously, this is a word that gets branded out a lot, but if you're serious about increasing the diversity of your forces, bolt action, 28mm wargaming, and the desert is a great place to start. And the reason I say that specifically is obviously the Desert War had all these other nations involved in there. There was a battalion of Maori tribesmen from New Zealand. So all kinds of people from all over the world, number one. And number two, these 28mm games like Bolt Action are mostly infantry based. And most of these multinational units that I'm listing here are infantry units. So Bolt Action, 28mm, and in the desert is where you can really start to crank up the diversity of your forces for wargaming.
Very cool. Very cool. And I'm guessing with it all being like allied forces, your vehicle pool, if you do have any vehicles, I'm guessing you're actually drawing from sort of the same types of vehicles. Would they have shared technology much?
Between the allied forces, most certainly, yeah. Most of the heavy artillery and motorized units are going to be British. What the British would do, and you see this in some of the later phases of the Desert War, is okay. They started the war with regiments of Mark 6Bs. No, I'm not talking about King Tigers. I'm talking about the Vickers Mark 6B. You know, I mean, really terrible, like A-13s, these old cruiser tanks that are just terrible, you know. And then later on some Matildas and some Valentine 3s. Okay, that gets them through the battles of 41. Late 41, they start getting the Crusaders and the first American Honey Lend-Lease. So then what they start doing is they start saying, okay, take all these old junkie tanks that are left over from previous campaigns, combine them into these detached regiments, and kind of bolt them to the side of these infantry divisions. That's when you start seeing infantry tanks. Infantry tanks, I mean Matildas and Valentines. The British classified them as infantry tanks. Infantry tanks attached to infantry divisions. There's still going to be British crews, but that's where you can see multinational infantry on the same table as heavy mechanized armor.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. The next thing you wanted to chat about was Desert War highlights for the strategy.
Yeah, we kind of went over this a little bit. Again, people like to ask a lot of times, like, why are we fighting over piles of sand? I mean, and there's a lot of misinformation in these documentaries out there. I feel like sometimes that's why God put me on Earth, was to refute bad documentaries. You see things where the Allies and the Axis were here fighting over Persian Gulf oil. We had to defend the oil in the Persian Gulf. But that's just nonsense. What they're trying to defend is, we see here on the map, now he got me saying it, the Suez Canal. So the Suez Canal really was under threat. The Suez Canal, if it had been cut, really does bisect the British World Trade Empire as shipping lanes. It really does a lot of damage. There's all these nightmare scenarios that people like to roll out, where if Rommel had broken through, he would have gone into Jerusalem, he would have gone into Iraq, he would have reached the Persian Gulf. You guys know he had like 2, maybe 3 divisions at any time. He couldn't keep fueling them as it was in Libya. You're going to drive, 500 miles all the way over to Iraq. Then he's going to meet up with the Germans coming down out of the Caucasus. Oh, okay, that's just absurd. And then even worse, he's going to meet up with the Japanese in the Indian Ocean somewhere. Okay, let me know how that works out for you. But there really was a strategy here. It got started off, like we were talking about before, almost by mistake. Mussolini and his free empire he thought he was going to get. The British, while they didn't really ever consider Mussolini that big of a threat, there really is a problem with the British holding on to the Suez Canal. The British are involved in holding the Suez Canal as late as 1956 in one of the Arab-Israeli wars you guys were talking about recently. And the Germans get dragged in by the Italians. The Germans want nothing to do with this. And by the same token, the Americans get dragged in by the British. The Germans get dragged in by the Italians. The Americans get dragged in by the British. Germans and the Americans wanted nothing to do with this war. They're like, why are we messing around with? But there is some strategy here, and we do talk about that in the article series.
Very cool. All right, now, conditions and logistics is something very important to talk about, as for the history, but as well as for the types of gaming tables we're going to want to create for the boot camp.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
What sort of terrain are we looking at, guys? John, what do you think?
Well, going by our lovely notes, I don't want to steal too much thunder from Jim.
Oh, go ahead.
But in the desert, you'll have the grand strategy as we've just talked about.
Yeah.
So like the Suez Canal will be the big grand strategy. But what does the average soldier and the average colonel and commander want on the ground? Well, they're going to want at least 3 to 4 things.
Right.
They're going to want water.
Yeah.
They're going to want food. They want ammunition and fuel.
Okay.
That's the 4 things to keep an army in the desert going, you need those 4 items to make the army work.
Yes.
If one of those isn't there, well, they're going to have to go and look for it.
Mm-hmm.
If they run out of that thing, that's a problem. That's an army starting to retreat, or a division unable to fight.
Yeah.
So you do find this becomes very critical. Oases, for example, if you find a nice little oasis with a bit of clean water in it, well, you're going to want to fill every tanker you have and make sure that those tankers are safe at the same time. So what do you need to do? You need to do what Patton would call a reconnaissance and force.
Right.
You want to chuck your division at something and go, right, let's take that, let's hold that for as long as we friggin' can. And if we have to pull back, let's make sure we've taken every drop of water that we require from it.
Okay.
Same with fuel.
Right.
You hear stories of people saying, oh, siphon fuel out of captured tanks and captured vehicles. Genuinely, what you actually did was you just used the vehicle until it ran out of fuel. There's tons of pictures of Rommel's Afrika Korps using, in the latter stages of the Desert War, American half-tracks with a black cross painted on the side.
Yeah.
Because it worked. If it worked, why would you take the fuel from it or destroy it?
Yeah, and why would I actually put the wear and tear onto my own vehicle?
Yeah.
Any more than I have to.
Yeah.
There's a photo I ran across in a book relatively recently where it's like this big 2-page spread of a German column advancing in Tunisia. And I ran across it while I was doing the American Tunisia series. And I thought, what's that American division doing with a German armored car? There's like 20 American, I'm totally not kidding. There's like 20 American half-tracks in there, and there's one SDKFZ 234, I think, off to the side. I'm like, I never knew Americans used German armored cars. Oh, that's a German column using like 20 American half-tracks.
Yeah.
The use of captured equipment, it's something that always comes up a little bit in some fronts.
Yeah.
Not really in the Western Front, but in the East you see it a little.
Yeah.
In the Pacific, you see it a little. In the desert, man, you see whole regiments. Rommel's first battle against the British.
Yeah.
The entire British force, almost the entire British force, is equipped with Italian M13s.
Yeah.
Their tanks are all they're not destroyed because they just got done beating the Italians. They won those battles, but they drove those Matildas like 500 miles in the desert with no break.
Yeah.
The British have no Matildas left. The British Matilda force has destroyed itself.
Yeah.
And now they have to rebuild very quickly. They say, well, we just captured like 400 Italian tanks. All right, it's not the best solution because these are Italian tanks, but they used them, and Rommel spends most of the war driving around in a captured British truck. I can't remember exactly what type it was, but it was basically bigger than the average British truck. And when Rommel wanted his mobile headquarters, he was like, you know what, I'm the general, I'm in charge. I'm taking that big truck over there. It's got room, it's got space, I can stretch out, and I'm the general, I get to say what I want. So, yeah, it's captured equipment. You guys really hit on it with that one. Captured equipment is always something in World War II, but in the Desert War, it's paramount. Absolutely.
Could that make for interesting narrative scenarios for gamers out there who maybe want to actually mix some of the forces together a little bit?
It could make for a very interesting army project.
Yeah.
If you're playing as, let's say I want to do a unit of the 21st Panzer.
Yeah.
And I want a reconnaissance squadron or something like that, or a reconnaissance team. I'm looking at it going, well, I can take 222 armored cars, or I could take one of the 8 whalers, but there's a Humber over there that I really like the look of. I could just take that, or I could take a Dingo or something and paint that and put a German cross on it and be like, that'll do.
Yeah.
And you can always say it counts as, or if your opponent allows you, just say, it's a Dingo.
Yeah, it's a captured one.
Yeah, it's a Dingo with German crew.
It's one of those things. For me, the accessibility to historical games always comes down to your opponent. Yeah. How far down do you both want to drill? Because it's a conversation between the two of you as to what do we want to do? What part of this do we want to explore?
Yeah. And I think in my humble opinion, the Desert War gives you the greatest scope for looking at other model ranges and bringing them, like other armies, and bringing models from them into your own.
Yeah.
If you're playing as British, you could have German Opel Blitz trucks as your supply column.
Yeah.
You could, if you're doing Germans, you could have the half tracks, or if you're doing later war, you could do that British force with the Italian M13s.
That's actually quite cool.
If you really, really wanted to. I mean, I don't see why anybody, even the Italians, took Italian tanks.
It was definitely a move of desperation.
Yeah.
All right.
But as far as like the terrain that you would see on a 28mm table, I mean, a lot of times we set up tables, and especially in 28mm gaming, and it's like, okay, I got some bushes, I got some trees, I got a fence. Obviously, the desert is very different. So we see here in this picture, the desert is incredibly flat.
Yeah.
And we all like some elevation in our tables, but in the western part of the desert, the Libya and Egypt part we were discussing earlier, there really isn't any. At least not that's obvious. There are some forts, some oases, some rocky outcrops, but those are definitely the exception. Most of this battlefield is as flat as a pool table. There, up until you get to something that I'm sure John knows what I'm talking about here, something called hold down shielding.
Yep.
And hold down shielding is a particular tank tactic where you take advantage of the absolute smallest pieces of terrain. These are the kinds of terrain I've tried to do on 15mm table. It's almost impossible in 15mm. 28mm you might be able to get away with it. I'm actually interested to see to try out some things in 28mm. And this is where the ground does slope, but almost imperceptibly. You see pictures of tanks from both sides in the desert walking around with engineering surveyors equipment, and they're literally, because it's like, okay, over this 500 meters, the ground goes up like maybe 5 feet or 5 meters or something. You know, it's almost imperceptible. When you're standing there looking at it, it looks flat. But what you don't see in this photograph over here is that there are ripples in that ground, okay, that the engineer can see and what the tank can take advantage of. The tank will drive up behind that, and he'll point his gun down over the top of that just barely. It's not the same as, okay, here's flat ground, here's a nice little railway embankment. I drive up my tank behind it, and now there's a, you know, gun sticking over the top. This is a little more subtle than that. It's, okay, here's 500 meters of terrain, and it comes up in a very, very shallow kind of a point. The tank drives up right behind that and then depresses its gun over the top. And you're basically hiding 40 to 50% of the tank at that point. This is what they call hold down shielding. The Israelis were masters of this, especially in the Sinai in 56, 67, and 73. The Germans got very good at it. The British got very good at it until they got the American grant, Lend-Lease. And this tank is like 14 feet tall. The hold down shielding doesn't work very well when your tank is 14 feet high. But there are little tricks that you can use in the desert to recreate specific desert conditions. Of course, once you get over to Tunisia, just take everything I just said and reverse it. The Tunisian desert gets very rocky, very hilly. There's a lot of mountains, a lot of cliffs, a lot of passes. There are some escarpments that you can play with in the Western Desert. There are some very important passes you see in the early part of the war. Halfaya Pass is one of the big ones you see in Operation Battle Axe in June of 41. The Qatar Depression we talked about during the previous boot camp. So yeah, there are some terrain things that you can play with at 28mm in the desert.
Very cool. John, what do you think yourself?
Well, what have you got a specific?
Well, for me, I'm thinking, because we're having the boot camp, we're going to have to build tables for it. So we actually need to start thinking about, well, I mean, like this week we'll have seen the first part of our vlog going out where we're starting to work on a trench board.
Yeah.
And we're having to consider what sort of terrain elements we can lay around that so that it's not just two big flat boards with just trenches dug into it.
Yeah. Yeah,
did somebody watch my How to Do a Trench Battle in World War I series a little while ago? No. We actually had a whole 40-minute conversation on just how to do a trench board. And trench warfare is not something that you think comes up very often in desert warfare. Kind of, once in a while. These, the troop densities, very small armies in the desert, and as we showed on the previous slide, very large battle areas. This means the troop density is very, very low. When the troop density is low, your units get spread out a great deal. This means that there's now space between your units, and the enemy can attack you from any side. We get into this in part 3 of the article series, where we have one of our big defensive battles. The British would deploy their fortified positions, including these trenches, and minefields become a big thing. If you guys are building some sort of a fixed positional defense in the desert, consider minefields. Seriously. And the British, what the British would do, and also the Italians and the Germans, when they got put on the defensive, is that they would not get to build their lines in the World War I style trench straight across. They have to build them in these boxes because it's 200 meters, 2 kilometers, 220 kilometers to the next unit. You might get hit from the flank, you might get hit from the rear just as easily as from the front. The desert warfare is extremely mobile. You're going to have to build your defense in a box. So that's something that you definitely see in the Desert War, especially a little bit later on.
Yeah, well, our current consideration that we're working towards at the minute is we're looking at doing 2 6-foot boards, which are a continuous network, but it's the one deployment site is actually the very front of the trench, and then it's moving deeper into the trench network. So it's not actually having that open space, it's actually fighting through that box.
Yeah, we're doing a trench assault, essentially.
Yeah.
On
Here we go. Someone was watching my stuff after. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's exactly what we get into. Don't put the 2 opposing trenches on the same table.
Yeah, no.
These guys attack these guys, and everybody gets killed.
Yeah, we're doing zero no man's land.
One side of the trench system, and then everyone just kind of gets in there.
Yeah, so basically one side of the table they're deploying into the trench, making that assault, and the other side is deploying in as if they've had to pull back from the front lines, as if there's just been an artillery bombardment.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
So that's what we're considering. Would that sound like believable to you, Jim, for a table for this?
There are some battles we go into in part 3 where 150th Brigade specifically is getting attacked by German 21st Panzer and elements of the Italian Ariete Armor Division, where they're getting attacked from behind because Rommel's gotten himself cut off. Don't ask me how you do that. Well, you can ask me, but we don't have time to go into it. Yeah, there are some big-time defensive battles. This is also a great place to use the Italians. I know we won't have Italians at the boot camp, but when you get units like these support units we keep mentioning, the Italians, the Indians, the New Zealanders, a lot of these guys are on defense a lot because they don't have heavy armor and a whole lot of artillery. So these are the defensive units. These are the guys you're going to see in these positional defenses. They don't have 500 trucks in their division to drive all over the place. They don't have the kind of battlefield mobility that you need for sustained offensive military operations in the desert. They get put in these static positional defenses that you guys sound like you're describing. This is where you see a lot of these other nationalities. Excuse me, these other nationalities.
Very cool. All right, is there anything else we need to cover in this one, Jim?
No, not really. We're just this whole article series, or this whole interview, is really just kind of a very quick overview of what's going on in this article series. It's also going over very, very quickly what's coming up in future media that we're rolling up to the boot camp. Okay, so coming up towards the boot camp, we're going to pretty much just the beginning of a media blitz, so to speak. That's going to be going on almost until right before the boot camp happens. More weekender segments, at least one live stream that I'm hoping to get on. And this is going to be one of the live streams that we're hoping to do is the General's Table. This is where we talk about the larger strategic and operational scope in a lot more detail. Why were these armies even here? Where do these campaigns actually take place? Who are the leaders? And the what if. Could the Axis really have won here? What's their path to victory? What kinds of things are they going to have to do to win here? And how may that have shaped the overall global conflict? Armies in the desert. This is where we get a lot more into that diversity that we're talking about. There's depending on how you count, up to 40 nations involved in the Desert War. So we definitely want to get into that. We also want to dispel some myths about how some units were always terrible and some units were always great. The Germans weren't always awesome. The Italians weren't always terrible. Things like that. At the boot camp, we're going to start talking about things like the Scorpions of the Desert. We're going to get really stuck into small unit tactics. We're going to see how these things perform at the squad, platoon, and company level. This is where you really get into the nitty-gritty of bolt-action style games. We're going to talk about specialist units, the SAS, the Long-Range Desert Group, German paratroopers, the Brandenburger Regiment, Italian paratroopers, the Fulgor Division, more about desert conditions and the role of tanks and how tanks might really be able to be used in a 28mm setting in the desert. And then lastly, Tales of the Desert. There are some things we're going to go over at the boot camp that are just amazing. If I start telling these stories, and of course other people have stories, John I'm sure has a bunch, there's Commodore Rob's going to have a pile of them. We start telling these stories, it's going to be like, okay, you guys are pitching us a Hollywood movie. There's no way this actually happened.
So I'm guessing those are for beer o'clock.
These things happened. And I won't get into the whole list now, but there's a lot of really amazing stuff. This is where half of Hollywood's movies seem to have come from. At least like the 1960s action-adventure movie, Yul Brynner, conquers the world or whatever. And you're like, this sounds like an old Force 10 from Navarone movie or something like that. No, this stuff really did happen.
Cool. You only have to look through some of the the German soldier memoirs that came out of the desert. Hans von Luck, again, I keep going back to Hans von Luck because
he seems to be a favourite of yours too.
It's fun to read.
When he was in the desert, he had a lot of tales like that, really interesting stuff. And God, I wish I could have met the guy because he narrated his own audiobook, and I was like, "This is amazing."
Really?
Yeah. He was.
I may need to actually hunt that down then. All right, well, Jim, if that's everything, I think we'll call it at that, gentlemen.
Sure.
Everybody, tell you what, get your comments in below. Is there anything that we haven't really covered here that you would love to actually hear about for Desert Warfare, for accessibility of tabletop games in the Desert War or in World War II in general? We'll move on here. We'll see you again very soon.
I honestly cannot wait to get Jim across here to the actual event, and I'm looking forward to some of the other stuff that he's wanting to do just online for everybody who's not making it.
Yeah.
One thing I'm really happy about is he has told me now, yes, the trench boards are okay that we're doing. They're not historically inaccurate. Someone just went, ding, are those accurate? Jim, help!
Yeah, I was concerned.
I was going to say, I will say, when we brought up some talk about building the boards and stuff, we mentioned pyramids, and he was like, oh no, I don't think they fought anywhere near the pyramids. And I was like, can we put pyramids on the board just to annoy Jim?
We could, but you could only fit a bit of a pyramid. What I'm actually thinking is, this would just be for the feature table, is more of that kind of Egyptian ruins rather than an actual pyramid itself. Yeah. It's like a ruined temple. Yeah, a ruined temple. Everybody knows the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't found in the pyramid. It may have lived in a pyramid. Go and watch backstage and you'll get all the detail of what happened. But it wasn't found there. Everybody knows that the Nazis found it in a ruined temple.
Right.
Wow. And now it's in a box.
Right. Time for some Kickstarters. Ben, what's our picks of the week?
Cool. So the first one we're going to be looking at is a role-playing one. So this is a funded project from Arcana Games or Arcana Games. That's how you probably say the word. And this is Arcadia, the Mythic Greek setting for 5th edition. Now, a lot of people will know that Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has obviously taken off very, very well.
Yes.
But the actual system itself is completely open source for people to use across all the different settings that they want to, creating their own worlds and all kinds of things like that. This game, Arcadia, is set within a fantasy Greek setting where you can play out all your adventures in this kind of awesome world that we know from like playing games like Mythic Battles Pantheon and stuff like that. They've got all the key sort of features that you have in D&D, but they've all got a little bit of a Greek twist to it. So, for example, elves are based on the Amazons, orcs are warriors with giant's blood in their veins, and you've got the Fae who are like satyrs and sirens, minotaurs, and all that kind of things. Now, obviously, in a lot of Greek games, those kind of monsters are things that you just go out and you kill in labyrinths and those kind of things. But in this game, minotaurs and those kind of fey creatures are actually part of the world itself, and you can interact with them, tell stories, learn from them, and even play those characters as well, which is really, really cool. As well as that, they've got some really nice new changes going into it in terms of the class system and how that works. So as well, of course, you've got things like fighter and all that kind of thing. But then you've also got some very nice Greek twists on that as well. So you've got the Herculean hero, if you want to be a barbarian. You've got the Spartan, who's the fighter archetype. And you've got the College of the Muse for the bards out there as well. And there's also the Sentinel, which is for the ranger. And that's kind of for those guys that really like playing as Amazonians and stuff as well in their games. The whole campaign is pretty much based around the idea of getting this book ready and printed. They've done all the writing for it. The next step for them and the whole reason behind their funding is that so they can get all the artwork done and make it look as pretty and as gorgeous as possible. They've also got some really nice stretch goals planned for this as well. They've got things like a soundtrack, they've got rules for naval warfare, and they've got some really nice options coming up for the likes of magical weapons that you could use in your Greek mythology settings as well. The whole world, as I say, it's historical, but it's also fantasy inspired as well. So the land of Arcadia is like Greece, but not quite like it. And there's some really nice influences from across the sea as well. So you've got some stuff from Egyptian mythology in there too, which is really, really nice as well.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, if you like the idea of playing in a little bit of a different setting, trying out some Greek stuff and that kind of thing, then you've got a very nice setting here for you to go and delve into. Especially if you like Sumerians, for example, maybe, and you want to do some stuff in ancient Greece instead. So
this is a game setting I would love to delve into. I used to read so much Greek mythology as a kid. And of course I love those old Ray Harryhausen movies like Jason and the Argonauts. How cool would it be to roleplay as the Argonauts through that?
That would be amazing.
Exactly. It would be fantastic.
Justin and I am working on a system just for me and you. It's called Spartan Cadet. Okay. And it's basically a Spartan training camp, and I'm the daddy Spartan, and you're the young Spartan that I'm taking care of. Don't worry about it, man. It's a great RPG.
So you're gonna one time you told me you owed me.
Yeah.
Okay, moving swiftly on. that project has 25 days left.
Yeah,
go and check it out. I think it looks awesome.
Double funded.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I think that's definitely one well worth trying out. Next up,
actually, is it more than double funded?
Next up, we have.
Yep.
I can't believe we're saying this, but Power Rangers.
Go Power Ranger.
Yeah.
I used to love this when I was a kid.
Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Welcome to the 90s, Warren.
This is a new game that's on Kickstarter from
Fuck me! Look how well funded it is.
It's absolutely amazing.
Nostalgia.
It's very well funded. It's a cooperative board game for 2 to 5 players where you take on the role of the Power Rangers from the original series.
Yeah.
Which is very, very cool indeed. And you're going to be taking on the forces of Rita Repulsa and her aliens and all the kind of monsters that she brings to the table as well. One of the cool things about this project is that the miniatures that they've designed for this, they're not like your standard 28mm stuff. They're actually near enough to like 50mm in size. They're pretty big when you see it in scale compared to some of the other miniatures out there. And that's so that you've got that really cool, heroic comic book feeling to everything that you're playing on the tabletop. The idea of this is that you're going to be playing as the Rangers, and there's going to be a set of areas laid out on the board that represent Angel Grove, which is where the Power Rangers was set. And on your turns, lots of different monsters are going to spawn onto these different areas, and you have to work together as the Power Rangers to go to these different areas, defeat the monsters, and level up your Power Rangers to fight the final boss, which will be brought on by Rita Repulsa herself. This, of course, means that you're going to be seeing some really cool things like upgrades for the Zords, and of course there's the Megazord as well, which is just amazing, and I'm really annoyed that I sold mine because mine was amazing, but never mind. But anyway, the game's got some really cool sort of mechanics built into it. It's all driven by cards, so the cards that you play on your turn allow you to do different types of attacks and things like that, and you can chain them between the different Power Rangers because they've all got a very nice asymmetrical nature to them. The other really cool thing about this, which I really, really like with games like this, is that the card deck is actually your life as well. So you've actually got to try and measure out the fact that you can't just go ham on one area and try and destroy all the putty men and take out the big bad there. You've got to try and conserve it for the end of the game because you've got to take on that big guy, that big boss that Rita Repulsa has brought down onto the table. Tabletop, which is very cool. I've got putty in my mouth apparently. But yes, some really cool stuff here for Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. A really awesome looking Kickstarter, and I think if you like that old school Saturday morning style cartoon feel, this is going to be a game that you really enjoy. And Renegade Game Studios have been doing some really nice stuff over the last couple of years and stuff as well. So keep this one in mind. As you were saying, it's really well funded. And they've unlocked a lot of really nice stretch goals as well. So keep an eye on this one.
There you go, guys. Get stuck into your Power Rangers. A little bit after my time, but bang on the money for you guys, I'm sure.
Well, funnily enough, I wasn't that into Power Rangers as a kid. I must be the only person from the 90s who wasn't a big Power Rangers fan.
It first came out whenever I was in like 3rd year of primary school, and every Saturday morning I was up and I was watching The Big Breakfast waiting for it to come on.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we had a competition last week for someone to win a 2-player starter bundle from the beautiful Drowned Earth. You were going to get a rulebook, Rice, Bondsman, and Militia. Many of you were telling us your favorite dinosaur, and Sam, our winner was?
Our winner was Darkling. And they said, I would choose Brontosaurus, the bigger, the better. And from the range of Drowned Earth, I like the gorillas the most.
Very cool.
And do you want to know something interesting?
Certainly.
There is no such thing as a Brontosaurus.
Really?
Correct. Brontosaurus was
it's
removed.
The false name for one.
Yeah, it was removed from the taxonomies. It's no longer a name.
Right.
So there is Argentinosaurus, which is the largest of those quadruped, long-necked dinosaurs. But there is, and it's Brontosaurus is probably after T-Rex, one of the most common name that we all know just on the tip of our tongue, Brontosaurus. But there is no such thing as a Brontosaurus.
Well,
I remembered it now. It's now been renamed as an Aptosaur. Because it was in my really awesome old school comics that I got about dinosaurs back in the day. Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
So you see the way most museums and even the movie Jurassic Park actually show them with the necks being up high to reach up onto like branches and stuff to eat food?
Yeah.
That was actually incorrect.
Yeah.
They were actually low-necked, sweeping across the low brush of the ground.
Yeah, we think so anyway.
Well, Apparently some scientists did some tests and they would have broke their neck if they'd been reaching up that
Exactly,
high.
And we trust scientists,
We
don't
do
we?
trust
We trust
scientists.
the experts.
And
Okay.
here's the thing. I trust my scientists. I don't trust your scientists. I haven't seen their credentials.
Look, a massive thank you once again to Ben on the screen, Justin in the chair, Sam in the chair, and most of all, look, thank you to you guys. If you want to get to know us, why not come across tomorrow, support the project, join backstage, and you'll get to meet Sam, Justin, Ben, Don, Gianna, Cass, Ryan, Colin, Lance, Lloyd,
John,
Tom, and myself.
Yeah. Don't let that put you off, though.
Don't let that put you off. Yeah, you can see some of the horrendous questions that we got asked. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see a load of you tomorrow. Take it easy. We hope you enjoyed this Let's Play. Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now, and be sure to check out beastsofwar.com for the latest gaming news and gaming Let's Plays. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe, and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.
There is no heroic stab. Sorry, Justin.